Hello, hello, hello. Hey, so today what we're going to be talking about is just more of what we've already talked about, but we're going to add on to it a bit. So we're going to do absolute value. So we'll review three problems with absolute value, and then we'll talk about using it in order of operations, because we'll also look at that absolute value symbol like a parentheses. And then we'll review some more multiplication and division of integers, and then we'll talk about what story problems might look like with that. Okay. All right. So let's start with this. First of all, remember that absolute value is just represents the distance from zero. Okay, that's going to be a good one to highlight. And I've been bringing up lately because some of you guys are really doing a good job of using color in your notes. I would just ask you to just continue to use color in your notes. I think you're going to find it helps your brain see things better. You're going to remember it better. When you go back to your notes to review it, it's going to make more sense. And some of you are going to find out that as you're using color, as I use color here, but that's going to help you. And then as you do it on your own, it's going to start out looking like you vomited color on your paper, but eventually you're going to become well practiced at those colors that make the biggest difference to you. And once you find that out, once you develop that practice, it's going to be something that's going to stick with you for the rest of your educational career. All right, so let's put some numbers in here and see how you do. Okay, so now evaluate these three. From what we've already done, what's the absolute value of 25? What's the absolute value of negative 12? And what's the absolute value of 17? Okay, go. You should be able to do this in about 30, probably at most a minute. If you have to, draw it, but go ahead. All right, so if you look at these, okay, I've drawn the number lines to help you understand it, right? But the absolute value of 25 is 25. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. And the absolute value of 17 is 17. So you want to make sure you're looking at whether or not, I mean, I hope you looked at it and you tried it yourself to see if you're making a mistake. Because when you make the mistake and you're learning it, as you're learning this new thing, and we don't think this is too new to you, but again, you should be seeing the number line. You should understand that if I put a 2, 4, 6, 8, I can assume that in between these, I just have to make sure these are in even increments. So in other words, it has to go, if I'm going to increase from one tick to the next two, every one of these has to increase by 2 to be an accurate graph, right? So if I know and understand that in the middle of that halfway is 1, that's the biggest thing you got to grab. So when I look at this one, for the second one, I looked at it, and this is another thing that might be new to you, so you might want to write this down, is this is how we progress when we go left, when we go right to left, we're going negative if we're going to the left of 0. But remember, absolute value is really just about how far away. So the negative here gives us a direction, right? But when we do the absolute value, we're not looking at direction. We're just saying how far away. What's the distance from 0? Like if you're looking at your house and you're trying to figure out, and you got to go 12 blocks south of it, when someone says, how far away are you from that position? If you're 12 blocks away from the school and they say, how far away is the school from your house? You don't say 12 south, 12 blocks south. You just say it's 12 blocks away. Okay, I mean, so that's what we're doing with this. That's what absolute value means. Okay, so you should, let's see if you know those, but let's move on to the next. Okay, so let's adjust these a little bit because you don't know how to do this yet, how to take 7 minus 9. So just put a 1 in front of there. So, and then what we're going to do is make this one change also. So we're going to change this one over. Just forget that. Okay, and rewrite it as the absolute value of negative 17 minus 9. I think I'm going to put a couple number lines in there also. So we need to remember this order of operations that we wrote out before, right? So we need to remember that we're going to consider these absolute value symbols like a parenthesis. So we need to simplify what's inside first before we take the absolute value. So I'm still taking the absolute value, but I have to simplify what's inside first. So to start off, I'm just going to rewrite it. And 17 minus 9 is going to be 8, right? So the absolute value of 8. And the only reason why we have the number line is if you're struggling with what the absolute value of 8 is. But the distance that 8 is from 0 is 8, okay? Okay, so that's that. If it's all inside of there, we got to take care of it first. But if we look at this one, it's not all inside. So what we have to do is, and some of you are pretty good at this, you're going to rewrite it, right? You're going to carry it over, and then you're just going to say, well, what is the absolute value of negative 17? So that's going to be 17. And then we can go ahead, and that takes care of it. That's the operation. Now we have just 17 minus 9, and that is 8. Okay. Now you might say, oh, look, we got the same result. But we're really talking, we had a positive 17 there and a negative 17 here. And the 9 was inside the absolute value here, and it's not inside the absolute value there. So it's important that you understand those two things. Okay, so if I take, okay, so if I look at this, I have negative 12, the absolute value of negative 12 plus 4. So again, this is like a parenthesis. So I have to take care of that absolute value first. And the absolute value of negative 12 is 12. So this becomes 12 plus 4, which is 16. And you're done. Okay. Now again, so these two, we had to take care of it first and then continue the operation on what was happening to the outside of it. But on this one, we're just taking care of what's happening on the inside and then taking the absolute value. So 25 plus 7 is 32. And then we're just going to take the absolute value of that, and that's just 32. Because how far away is 32 from 0? It's 32 away from 0. All right. Okay, so absolute value, we're using it like an operation. So we use it like a parenthesis. So, if you need to, just put a little line over here and tell yourself, absolute value is the same thing as a parenthesis. It's just another, we've already talked about that you could have brackets, right? And then parentheses. So absolute value is just another thing. One of the things to remember is this is going to be called the distance symbol by the time you hit 9th grade, okay? Maybe even touch on it in 8th grade. Okay, let's move on to some more review from what we did in our last lesson. Okay, so as review, go ahead and do these 3 problems. Okay, so do those, hit pause. I'll show you the next 2, just to review. So this should only take you a couple minutes. See if you remember the rules. Go back and look at your notes. There should be some rules you should have written down, right? So go look at those notes. If you didn't take them in the video, you took them in class. So just write those, go look at those, write those down here and finish it. You should almost be done because you could use your multiplication table. Okay, so I just hit pause and we'll go from there. Okay, so you should be remembering these 2 sets of rules that a positive times a positive, right? A positive times a negative is a negative. That a negative times a negative is a positive. That negative times a positive is a negative, and then a positive times a positive is a positive. Now, if we were doing it the other way around, where we were doing addition first, this would make a little bit more sense maybe. So we're trying to consider which order. We'll see how you guys do with this. And so again, if we look, a positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative, and a negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive, and a negative divided by a positive is going to be a negative, and a positive divided by a positive is a positive. So you got to kind of remember those rules and then apply it, okay? So applying those rules, you would see that -4 times a negative times a negative. Really, that's all you're doing. You're asking yourself, what's a negative times a negative? It's a positive. And what's 8 times 4? 32. And what's a negative divided by a positive? Negative divided by a positive is a negative. And that means, and 8 divided by 2 is 4, so that's going to be -4. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And so we put the positive symbol there, and 63 divided by 7 is 9. Okay, so that's a good review. Now do these next two problems. Okay, so fill those in and go ahead and do those. Okay, so again, you should be remembering the rules. So a negative times a negative is a positive. 2 times 13, just like in the multiplication table. And that's going to be 26. When you look at the next one, it's a positive times a negative, which is going to come out to be negative. When you look at the multiplication table, 11 times 9 is just 99. Okay, so that's the review of that. So really, we're talking about this. You should be getting this. You're going to have a quiz on this. This is the part you want to make sure you understand for the quiz, right? Because this is the difference between the A and the B. If you can't do this one, you can't have an A. Okay, so, and you're going to have a limited time to do this one because we figure this is that difference, okay? So when you look, we got to look at this and see what it's asking us to do. So again, we're going to use IVASA, right? So there's IVASA, identify the question, draw a visual verbal model. That's just going to help you figure out what you're actually doing. Define the variables, if there are, write out the expression or the equation, solve it, and then answer the question. Okay, so if I look, it's going to say, it asks, what's the total change on this one? This is what's really important, is that you're looking at the question so you know what your answer is supposed to resemble. So if I look, it says I'm going downward, right? So that means I'm starting at one height, and then I just keep moving. Now for 63 seconds, I move 9 meters per second. So that means as I draw a visual model of this, what I'm going to have is, I'm going to draw this as my time, right? This is my seconds. And then I'm going to just say, well, I'm dropping 9 meters every second. Right? So if I'm dropping 9 meters every second, then here at 2 seconds, I've dropped 18 meters. At 3 seconds, I've dropped 27 meters. At 4 seconds, I've dropped 36 meters. At 5 seconds, I've dropped 45 meters, right? So these are all how far I've dropped in elevation. So how far am I going to drop in 10 seconds? And how far would I drop in 15 seconds? And then, if you could think about that, then how far are you going to drop in 63 seconds? So think about that. What are we doing every time? We're taking the time times the rate. the rate, you're going to see in your technology classes, you're going to see rate times time equals the distance. So at this point right here, our time is 5. Our rate is still always just 9 meters per second, and 9 times 5 is 45. So if we look at 10 seconds, then we'd say our rate is still 9 meters per second. We have 10 seconds. That's going to mean we're at 90 meters. And so what does that mean then if we're doing it for 63 seconds? Well, we're going to take 9 meters times 63, 9 meters per second times 63 seconds, which means we're going to have traveled 567 meters. So our answer would be the total change in the tram's elevation is 567 meters. Okay, now if we think about this, we're dropping, right? So we're really taking 9 and making it negative, which means a negative times a positive is a negative, and we have dropped. So we would use that negative to show that we've dropped. We've dropped 567 meters. Okay, so think about these two. We'll talk about these two in class. And remind me to talk about these two in class. We'll talk about these two in class and see how you do. But you could look at it and think about it, but I don't want to take any more time. So we've just reviewed how you do a story problem and how to do the more difficult order of operations with distance formula and with the absolute value. So good luck. Hey, have a good day.